in Iran. Well, joining me live now to discuss all of this is Laura Blumenfeld, former senior policy advisor at the US State Department, now a Middle East analyst at the Johns Hopkins School of International Studies. Thank you so much, Laura, for taking the time to be with us on this developing news story. You will have just heard there that statement from Israel saying that they have wrapped up this retaliatory set of strikes, attacks there on Iran. What do you make of the operation?
Well, as the United States officials have been saying, we've been looking for a day after for this conflagration. I would say this was the night before. I do think that the Israelis think that it's going to be a one-day war, and if so, then we'll be quite lucky. We have boots on the ground. The United States have American soldiers operating our missile defense system, the THAAD missile defense system, which we deployed. I think the idea behind that was for the U.S. to kind of escalate Israel's defensive measures so that to sort of de-escalate Iran's offensive measures, which is what we're really worried about as in terms of next steps. If this is considered as the sun rises and the smoke clears, a limited strike, but with a strong message from Israel, but not so strong that Iran has to retaliate, then maybe we are ready to move forward toward that more comprehensive peace. But the great concern in Washington and beyond is that it's just another step in this cycle, which keeps spinning out of control and is precedent breaking. Each time we're kind of going a step further. There were 100 Israeli jets over Tehran overnight, which is really unprecedented. There haven't been enemy aircraft over Iran since the 80s, the Iran-Iraq war.
So what do you think then? I appreciate that it's very difficult to predict, but do you think that the intended plan of drawing a line in the sand and saying, enough, this ends here, could work
think the Israelis,
if that's the desired effect?
What I see is that the Israelis have baked a kind of retaliation layer cake, and this is just the first layer. They didn't go after nuclear sites. They didn't go after, the oil production sites, and that was really what they wanted. That was the showdown blow that Netanyahu has been looking for years. But I think if there isn't any kind of counterstrike from Iran, it could be over, at least for now. My intelligence sources I reached out to this evening, I just want to read you a direct quote. What he said is, the message that we sent was that we can do whatever we want, wherever we want, at any given moment. So if message is received, then I would say that we can expect and hope for some quiet. I also think it's very important to note the election, the presidential election in the United States, which is on November 5th. I think that's a very important, you mentioned line in the sand. I think that this strike was probably limited on purpose because they don't want to embarrass the Biden-Harris administration. The Israelis are heavily dependent on the United States and grateful, I should hope, for the support we've been giving them. And so I think that they weren't going to go all the way with this strike after the election. Depending on Iran's response, it could get a lot darker and more dangerous.
That's the question, isn't it? Presumably, Tehran might not have to be quite so obedient of those optics or play by the same rules. And if they do go ahead with a response, do you then anticipate that, for example, Netanyahu, and your analogy there of a layer cake, might look to target something like a nuclear facility?
Well, it's certainly been the opportunity he's been looking for years. I mean, that's just, he's been Mr. Iran, right? He's been obsessive with that. But also Defense Minister Gallant, Israel's defense minister, once said to me a long time ago when he had an opportunity to take out the top leadership of Hamas, he regretted not doing so, not dropping the kind of heavy bomb, because at the time he was trying to limit civilian casualties. And what he said to me is what he learned from that was that you either go all the way or you don't go at all. So I do think that you have a lot of kind of older generals and fighters in Israel who've sort of seen many rounds here, and they feel like this is their opportunity. They want to go for the kind of knockout blow that they've been dreaming about for decades.
And what could that opportunity look like under a different administration come January?
Well, look, Donald Trump, former President Trump, said to Netanyahu reportedly, get your victory and quit the killing. He wants it to be over. And Vice President Harris also for very different reasons, is looking for, an end to this cycle, which is why the next few months are particularly dangerous between now and January. I think Netanyahu feels like this is almost like a kind of free-for-all period, again, from after the election and before the inauguration, where you could argue that this would be the window that he's going to want to jump through. He looks at things very much not in terms of in the moment, but from a historic perspective. It was his 75th birthday party recently, and he quoted his father from his 100th birthday celebration, talking about the long kind of vision of history. His father was a historian, and I think that's how Netanyahu is framing things. He sees himself as a Churchill. I know that a lot of people laugh at that, but in his mind, he's a historic figure, and so this is a historic opportunity.
Well, all of this comes at a time, of course, and we shouldn't lose sight of the fact when we have had warnings from the United Nations, particularly with regards to what is happening in northern Gaza, the UN Human Rights Chief calling it the darkest chapter there so far in the war. What do you think this latest escalation will mean for the situation there on the ground, the Palestinians in Gaza?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of heartbreaking, the contrast and the juxtaposition between what's happening on the ground there. In my inbox has an email from Secretary Blinken with the headline, "Charting a Path to Lasting Peace and Security for Israelis and Palestinians." And then this. I think the way that Netanyahu looks at it is the kind of path to peace is through Tehran, which feels very upside down, but in the Middle East, that's the way things roll. According to Netanyahu, countries don't make treaties with the weak. So first he has to show that he's strong, and it's a kind of horrible scene. And we've been witnessing this kind of quest for deterrence over the last year. At what cost? Terrible, bloody cost.
All right, Laura Blumenfeld, former senior policy advisor at the US State Department, now a Middle East analyst at the Johns Hopkins School of International Studies. We always appreciate you being with us, Laura. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, we can remind